Smooth running operation where you have 5 people all working collectively, simultaneously to get this huge project completed.
He's just a really good leader.
One of the significant things about his nomination was that he was nominated by his actual direct reports.
It means a lot to me to have my team nominate me. It makes me feel appreciated that they see the work that I'm putting in.
I think that being nominated by his crew really shows the level of respect and appreciation that his crew has for him as a supervisor and a mentor.
He's someone you want to get behind and follow into the work that needs to get done.
We can get in some dangerous situations, working underground. So you're always trying to make sure you're looking out for their safety and doing your very, very best to make sure that everyone goes home at the end of the day.
Billy's crew are like his extended family. They're his family away from home.
It's almost like it's almost like a brotherhood.
I feel like you come across a couple of people in your lifetime that really stand out, and I think Billy's definitely one of them.
Anything big going on, they want Billy and his team there on site.
He's just a really excellent friend and boss, and just an excellent human being to be around.
Mr. Billy, I just want to say congratulations on now being awarded Employee of the Year for Manatee County.
Congratulations, Billy, on being named the 2022 Manatee County Employee of the Year.
You deserve it wholeheartedly. You are an outstanding human being.
I am excited to have you on my team, thankful to have you on my team, and I look forward to many more years to come.
It is a pleasure and an honor to work with you and the other dedicated employees throughout the utilities.
I think I can speak for everyone on the crew when I say that there's no one possible that could deserve it more than yourself.
My favorite part about my job is working with my guys. You often spend a little bit more time with the guys at work than you do with your own family. So you build that camaraderie because you're together like a brotherhood.
A roundabout is a compact, circular intersection with traffic flowing counterclockwise around a center island. Roundabouts can have a single lane or multiple lanes. Roundabout design channels traffic into the flow and are designed to slow traffic approaching and within the roundabout. Splitter islands direct and slow traffic as it enters the roundabout. The splitter islands offer pedestrians and bicyclists a spot to pause as they cross the road, allowing for safer crossings. The center island uses truck aprons, a raised area around the center island, which gives large trucks and even emergency vehicles a bit more room to move through the circle. Slow down approaching the roundabout. Look for walkers and cyclists at the crosswalks. Look left toward traffic and yield to traffic in the roundabout as they have the right of way. Merge into the roundabout. Exit where you want to go by turning right, and don't forget to use your turn signals.
Good morning. The TV is running, so we're going to go ahead and start this meeting. Our chairman is running a little late. He'll be here shortly. So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Let's start. As always, we know it's a beautiful day. It's always a beautiful day in Manatee County, so I'm not going to forget to say that. But in moving the agenda forward this morning, we'll go ahead and start with our invocation. Is Reverend Brock Patterson from Longboat Island Chapel. Yes, sir. Welcome. Thank you for being with us this morning. Please stand, and then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance by Mike Ron, Commissioner Ron.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this beautiful day, Lord, and for all of the work that you have already done that brings us together. Lord, you have already provided us with much more than we deserve. We are thankful. We are thankful for this opportunity to gather together to do the very best that we can for this community, Lord, for our community, and for your world. Lord, I ask your blessings upon all those who listen, who make decisions, on all those who present, Lord, give them all your blessings, on all those who are doing all the behind-the-scenes work to make it possible, Lord, we ask your blessings upon them and your blessings upon all of us of health and of safety. Thank you for all that you've done, Lord, and be with us as we do our very best to serve you for the rest of this day. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Good morning. I'll wait for the chair to.
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Chairman, I have not mentioned yet. I was going to let them know that Amanda was not going to be here, but I haven't done that. So that's as far as we got.
I usually don't even say anything. She's not. Okay. We will go to Mrs. DePaul for changes and announcements to today's agenda.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. So update memo for February 2nd, 2023. Citizen comments, under citizen comments for future agenda items, public comment letters were attached. Additional letters will also be entered into the record, which I've distributed to each of you, as well as the clerk. There's 2 letters in a packet underneath your agenda. Also under advertised public hearings, presentations upon request, item number 3, first public hearing for LDA-22-01, local development agreement for Lake Flores, PLN 2112-0033. It's a quasi-judicial item. This one will be continued to February 16th, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as same may be heard. The second public hearing will be moved to a regular meeting, and that will be February 28th, 2023 at 9 a.m. or as soon thereafter as same may be heard. Under advertised public hearings for presentations scheduled, item number 12, PDMU-18-11, ZG, Riverfront PDMU, RFT Holdings LLC, PLN 1806-0051. This one we attached public comments. Additional public comments will be passed out as well by our planner prior to that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, there is no consent agenda today, so we're going to move right into future agenda. Citizen comment on future agenda items. Is there anyone from the public who came today who would like to speak on a future agenda item? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I do have 2 people signed up. Let me do those first. Captain Thomas Carter, which very well may be you, and it seems that it is, and then Diane Carter. So this is for everyone in the audience. This is for items that are not on today's agenda, but you would like to see on a future agenda or are likely to appear on a future agenda. Sir, step up to the podium. Please state your first, your last name, your county of residence, and then you'll be allowed 3 minutes to address the board.
I am Thomas Carter, Captain, U.S. Army retired, contracting officer for the United States Army. I live in Bradenton, 7302 52nd Terrace East. Thank you, sir. I have that I want to pass out to everyone.
Okay, if you hand those to David, hopefully you have one for the clerk and then one for each commissioner. And please speak directly into the microphone, sir.
Thank you. While he's handing them out, what I want to address is the second to the last page in your packet. I want to tell you about what we did for this project. We went to the HOA, and we were basically told that there was no project, the stakes mean nothing, And when we proved that there was a project, we sent the project information off to the HOA, asked them to notify the residents of Creekwood, because nobody knows what this project is. We asked them to send it out, and they refused. However, they did send out the 44th project, but they refused to send this one out. Nobody knows this project's going on in Creekwood until they found out that we distributed this project out to them. Everybody thinks it's going down by the mall where you have your big sign. So there's vast confusion in this project. But I think it's unethical for what the HOA is doing and not allowing the people of Creekwood to know what's going on. You're going to have massive destruction of almost 100+ trees. It's not 50 what I put in there, because we found out more areas that you're going to cut down trees. You're going to cut down protected oak trees. You're going to cut down wildlife areas. These monuments are going to be destroyed. And I believe this whole project was not looked at in the right aspect, that this actually belongs in the back of the mall. They should have a road leading in the back of the mall that comes out on Creekwood Boulevard further up. That would alleviate this, and if you wanted to put a light up there, that could, because it's far enough away from 70. Any of the queue problems that you're talking about are actually going to SR 70. And it's not from Creekwood. It's not the other way. And no roundabout is going to fix being queued up to go to the traffic light to go on to 70. So
Discuss this with
Yeah.
you at this time.
Yeah, we don't dialogue, but this is your opportunity
Right.
to make your
I
case
know.
to us, and then
I
we'll take it up later.
put this in, and I asked any commissioner to come down to our house and see what's going on, sit in our pool, and see what is actually going to go on. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
And well-timed. Diane Carter? No? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward at this time to speak on a future agenda item? Okay, seeing no one, we're going to close citizen comment on future agenda items, and we're going to move into advertised public hearings. Oh, Commissioner Baugh, would you like to comment?
I am actually the commissioner in that area, and I'm a little surprised to be hearing what I'm hearing because I don't quite understand. So I'm going to ask that my aide, Dana, contact you, and you can't dialogue with me, I'm sorry, so that I can call you and have this discussion. And I will meet, so you know, I'm losing my voice, I apologize, with Public Works to have this discussion. So this will be looked into. Thank you for the information.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, no other commissioners on the board. We're going to move into advertised public hearings, presentation upon request. Attorney Shank has an item. It's mediated settlement agreement of Special Magistrate Clifford Shepard regarding Resolution R-22-094 denying application number PDR-21-07ZG to be continued to April 20th at 9 a.m. or as soon thereafter on the same day. Would anyone like a presentation? Okay, hearing none, we'll entertain motions. And David, this is probably the pace that the majority of the day will go.
And you take also public comment.
Yeah, we'll have public comment. Is there any public comment on item number 1? Okay, seeing no one, will close public comment. Madam Clerk, we have a motion by Commissioner Ron to continue, and that is seconded by Commissioner Baugh. We can cast our votes at this time. We're casting our votes at this time. Okay, and it passes by a vote of unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Move on to item number 2, development services. Okay, so there's no action required on this one. This is a resolution, appeal of administrative determination AD-21-31, no action. This item has been withdrawn by the applicant. Next item, number 3, is first public hearing for LDA-22-01, local development agreement for Lake Flores. This is quasi-judicial. It's to be continued to February 16th at 1:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter, same day it may be heard. Second public hearing is scheduled for February 28th, 2023 at 9 a.m. or soon thereafter on the same day as it can be heard. We have a motion by Commissioner Ron to continue. We'll do public comment in just a second. We have a motion by Ron to continue. We have a second by Commissioner Satcher. We'll open item number 3 up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number 3, Lake Flores? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, we can cast our votes at this time. It passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. We're going to move on to item number 4, which is Taylor Ranch SMR Taylor Ranch LLC, PLN 2111-0047. It's quasi-judicial and is to be continued to March 23rd, 2023 at 9 a.m. or as soon thereafter on the same day that it can be heard. Is there any public comment on the continuance of item number 4, Taylor Ranch SMR? Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment. Madam Clerk, there's a motion by Commissioner Baugh to continue. It's been seconded by Commissioner Ron. We can cast our votes at this time. And it passes, Madam Clerk, unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Item number 6, ordinance number 23-32, expansion of boundaries of Rye Crossing Community Development District, legislative. This is presentation upon request. Anyone like to request a presentation on item number 6? Okay, no presentation requested. We'll open this to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number 6 at this time? Okay, seeing no one, we're going to close public comment. We have a motion, Madam Clerk, by Commissioner Baugh to approve, and has been seconded by Commissioner Ron. We can cast our votes at this time. We're casting our votes at this time. Okay, and it passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Did I skip over number 5? I think I did. Okay. We're going to do number 5 now. PDR dash 21-02, Palm Grove Preliminary Site Plan. SMR Northeast LLC, Ranchland Investors LLC. This is quasi-judicial. This is to be continued to March 23rd at 9 a.m. or soon thereafter on the same day. We'll open this to public comment. Is there anyone who would like to come forward to comment on item number 5, the continuance of item 5? Okay, seeing no one, we're going to close public comment. We have a motion, Madam Clerk, to continue item number 5. The motion has been made by Commissioner Baugh and has been seconded by Commissioner Satcher. We've held public comment. We can cast our votes at this time. Has everyone casted their votes? Oh, boy. Okay. So it passes unanimously, Madam Clerk, by a vote of 6-0. We'll then move on to item number 7, which is Stonegate Preserve GDP Amendment.
Mr. Chair,
Ma'am.
should probably go through swearing people in exclusion of ex parte.
Oh, we're not going to continue this one? We're going to actually hold this item?
Yeah,
Okay.
7
Well, you're throwing me out of my groove, Sarah.
In case anyone
Okay.
speaks, to cue it up.
All right. At this time, we do have quasi-judicial items remaining on the agenda, so at this time, if you plan to speak or testify or present in any way, shape, or form at this podium on any of the remaining items, we'd ask you to please stand and be sworn by the clerk.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and representations you are about to make to the Board of County Commissioners are truthful and accurate? Thank you. When you step to the podium, please state your name, your county of residence, and if you have been sworn.
All right, so we're actually doing this one, and it's quasi, so I'm going to turn to Mrs. DePaul and ask her to introduce item number 8.
7.
Excuse me, item number 7.
Item number 7, PDMU-16-05GR, which is Stonegate Preserve GDP Amendment. DRP FL6 LLC is the owners, and that's PLN 2204-004. We have Kevin Oatman here to present if a presentation is requested.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, would anyone like to disclose any ex parte communication on item number 7? Okay, hearing none. It's quasi, so who is here to represent the applicant? Do you have any presentation you'd like to make, sir?
Only if the commission wants something.
Would anyone like to hear from Mr. Grimes? Would anyone like to hear Mr. Grimes talk again today?
I always like to hear
we always
Okay.
like to hear Mr. Grimes.
Okay.
Just a brief.
Mr. Oatman, did you have any presentation, or does anyone need a presentation from Mr. Oatman on this item?
Kevin always gets the tough, contentious one.
I know, I like
He does, right? Marshall seems to get thrown to the wolves on the big ones, doesn't he? So would anyone like a presentation from Mr. Oatman? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir. We're going to open this up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on item number 7? Okay, hearing no one, we're going to close public comment. There are no commissioners on the board for discussion or debate, so we'll move forward. There's a motion, Madam Clerk, by Commissioner Cruz to approve item number 7. It's been seconded by Commissioner Ron. We can cast our votes at this time. And it passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Well done, Mr. Grimes and Mr. Oatman. We'll move on to number 8, PDR. Well, actually, this is quasi. I'll let Mrs. DePaul introduce number 8.
Number 8, PDR-19-23GR, it's Star Farms, Lakewood Ranch Northeast 700. It's a GDP modification with 4-Star USA Real Estate Group, Inc. as the owner, and that's PLN 2206-0125. And we have Ross here to present if you'd like a presentation.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. This is quasi-judicial. Does anyone have any ex parte communication they would like to disclose on item number 8? Okay. We do have a request for a presentation from a commissioner, so who is here to present for the applicant? Please state your first name, last name, tell us if you've been sworn.
Alexis Crespo with RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture. I have been sworn. And I do have a few slides just to walk you through the request. The applicant is 4-Star. With me today is Caleb Grimes, who is the land use attorney on this, and this is a very simple request just to add an access point to an existing GDP that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners. The subject property is outlined in yellow. It is located to the north of 44th Ave. This is 700-acre site. It has multiple access points, is zoned PDR. It was originally approved back in 2020. The project is currently under construction. That aerial is a little bit out of date. And our request is simply to add one access point onto the eastern side of the project. There'll be no changes to buffers, the internal layout of the project, and this will just help disperse traffic better along our eastern property line from the various internal development pods. And we do have our traffic engineer as well as our civil engineer available, as well as Caleb if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. There are no commissioners on the board at this time.
Thank you.
Would you like a staff presentation? Okay. Who's here to present for staff anyway? Whose job? Okay. You can just hang out, but so far you're in the clear. There are no commissioners on the board for discussion, so then we'll move into public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number 8 on today's agenda? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close public comment. We still have no commissioners on the board, so we have a motion, Madam Clerk, by Commissioner Ron to approve. It has been seconded by Commissioner Satcher, and we can cast our votes at this time. It passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Moving on to item number 9, which is also quasi. Mrs. DePaul, please introduce item number 9 of
Item
Development
number
Services.
9, Z-21-05-K2, which is C2 Holdings LLC Rezone is the owner, and that's PLN 2106-0095. And we have Dorothy Rainey, our planner, here to present.
Commissioners, this item is quasi-judicial. Anyone have any ex parte communication they'd like to disclose? Okay, hearing none. Would anyone like to request a presentation from the applicant or staff?
It's presentation scheduled.
Oh, it is scheduled?
Yeah.
Who is here to present for the applicant? It always gets me when there's the headline, the heading is on one page, and then you turn the page for the item, and the headline's not above the items. Sir, first and last name, county of residence, and have you been sworn?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Bob Schmidt. I'm with Land Planning Associates and Manatee County resident, and I have been sworn. I'll present very briefly. This is just a down zone from RSF1 to A1 for some agricultural uses that have historically taken place in this property in Terracea. And they want to maintain that, and right now, because it's non-conforming, they really can't do that. If and when the day comes when they do subdivide the property and build on 1 acre lots, and people can have horses and things like that. But I'll keep it very simple. If you'd like to ask me any questions, please do. And my client, Mr. Kobe Hinkle, is here too if you have any questions for the owner. So with that, I'll leave it alone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Less is more. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none. Who is here from staff?
We have Dorothy.
Hi, Dorothy. Do you have any, would you like to, any presentation to make?
If you like, it's just going to be the basic information. I can go through.
Would anyone like to hear the basic information? We've all read the basic information, right? Okay. All right, thank you, Dorothy. Well done. We'll move into public comment. We'll move into public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number 9? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Any final comments from the applicant? Wonderful. We have a motion to approve, Madam Clerk, by Commissioner Ron. That has been seconded by Commissioner Satcher. We've held public comment. There are no commissioners on the board, so we can cast our votes now. And it passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Moving on to item number 10, also quasi, Mrs. DePaul.
Item number 10, PDC-19-25ZP, which is the Holiday Inn Express, Ellenton. Signature Hotel Ellenton LLC is the owner, and it's PLN 1911-0031. And again, we have Dorothy Rainey here to present after the applicant.
Thank you, ma'am. This is quasi-judicial. Commissioners, would anyone like to disclose any ex parte communication at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Who is here to represent the applicant?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Brian Lichterman. I am President of Vision Planning and Design, and I am a resident of Manatee County, and I'm pleased to be here this morning representing a gentleman named Paul Patel, who's proposing a rezoning petition and a preliminary site plan for the Holiday Inn Express Ellenton.
Have you been sworn, sir?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes, I have been.
Thank you.
So I'm pleased to be here this morning representing Mr. Patel. I'm also here with the architect of the general project, Ron Sevitz, who I'm going to ask to speak in a moment. I do have a quick PowerPoint presentation for you, and if I could have staff bring that up.
Madam Clerk, for your record, there has been a motion to approve by Commissioner Cruz and a second by Commissioner Ron. Continue, sir.
Okay, is my presentation up? I see it up there. I guess it's not over here. Okay.
It's on our screens.
I see. If I go to the next, here, I can do it. Okay, so some of the major project components here. This project is 2.93 acres in size. It is a rezoning petition from A1 and A1CH, Suburban Coastal High Hazard District, and PDW, Planned Development Waterfront, and PDWCH, Planned Development Waterfront Coastal High Hazard. And what we're proposing is a rezoning to PDC, Planned Development Commercial, and Planned Development Commercial Coastal High Hazard Overlay District, along with a preliminary site plan. The proposed Holiday Inn Express will be a 6-story, 92-room hotel. There will be 5 living levels over parking and approximately 67,764 square feet. A restaurant is proposed adjacent to the hotel building, which will be 2 stories and approximately 2,080 gross square feet. There is adequate water and sewer available and adequate capacity on the area arterial roadway network to support the proposed development, and we're showing approximately 37% open space, which shall be provided. Just to give you a quick overview of where this property is located, as you can see in this slide, this first gives you an area-wide perspective. You can see I-75 and the interchange at 301, and this property is located on the south side of US 301, on the north side of the Manatee River. This slide, once again, the aerial shows the location of the proposed hotel and the proposed restaurant. This is just a drone video of the site, and once again, it's a 2.93 acre property. This is another view looking to the west. You can see I-75 to your left there. And once again, this is looking to the east. Now I'd like to get into the preliminary site plan. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ron Sivitz, and Ron needs to be sworn in.
Hi, I'm Ron Sivitz. I have not yet been sworn in. Yes, I do.
Thank you. When you step to the podium, please state your name, if you've been sworn, and your county of residence.
Hi, Ron Sivitz with Sivitz Innovative Designs. I live in Sarasota, Florida, and I just was sworn in. This is the actual proposed preliminary site plan, and I just wanted to identify the basic components. We have a 30-foot wetland buffer area. There's an additional 15-foot setback line. This is the proposed 6-story hotel. We have the proposed wetland buffer enhancement, and I'll explain what that is in a bit. We have the existing wetland that continues around the shoreline on the other side, the proposed 2-story restaurant. I believe that's pointing, I can't see the yellow, to the landscape buffer required 8 feet on the west side. We have 2 access points. This is the one, and then we have the other. And the center, we have parking, stormwater areas. All right, this is a better view of it, just something a little more cleaned up to look at. And again, you know, we have a 30-foot wetland buffer. There's an additional line, a 15-foot setback line. Here's our proposed hotel. Again, the edge of the existing wetland line. The other side, the restaurant, the landscape buffer. Okay, this is showing the subject properties. Again, as Brian had shown. In this area here, this is you, I think. It's located in a flood zone, AE zone, and the building has to be elevated up and pile supported. And it's showing where that is on the subject properties. Again, it's located within the 301 I-75 entranceway, and appropriate measures are being taken for that. This is a general rendering. It's going to have a little more pop to it with some build-outs on the sides and the front that we received from the architect that's doing the hotel. This is from the waterfront side. And again, you know, your normal Holiday Inn Express is not necessarily always on the water, so we have balconies and pool area in the rear. And as I kind of just completed for you, that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, both Brian and I are available to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. No one's on the board. We'll go to Dorothy with the staff. Do you have any? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Cruz. Are you stature now? You wait till I move on and then you ask the question?
Just a quick question, more from what I was like. You're putting the 5 stories over parking, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Are you doing the lobby on the first floor, or is it a second floor lobby?
Well, the main lobby would be elevated up in the first habitable level, but you're allowed a minimal access way, which will have stairs, small area, and the elevators, and then you get in and go up. The other area is parking.
Okay. That's my question.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Satcher, you're on the board.
Is there a water access part or of the plan?
There's existing docks, and at this time, they are not proposing, and I believe it's stipulated, for mooring or boats to come up at this point. At some time in the future, he would have to, I guess, come back before the board, along with the other jurisdictions and state agencies, to get that approval.
Were you discouraged from making that part of the application, or?
No, I think the owners just wanted to get going with the hotel, and while it's in process, and construction's underway, they can make that decision at that point.
And then this might be a better question for staff, but I'll ask you to see if you know the answer. I believe there was I think it might have been a sleep-in, something like that, just a little bit to the west, that I think the state took down for the new bridge.
I'm not familiar with
Okay,
that.
I'll just ask staff when they come up if they're familiar with that or not. Okay, no other questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Satcher's first question was really on point. So this is not in my district, but the majority of the coastline is, and majority of the restaurants that are on the waterfront are in my district as well. And we love to get cars off the road and find other ways for people to visit amenities and commercial businesses. So I think if you brought to us down the road mooring for the restaurant, I think that would be well received by the board. So, and may not even make it to the board, to be honest. Staff will probably take care of it. Dorothy, do you have anything you wanted to add to that presentation? Okay.
Yes, good morning. Dorothy Rainey for staff, and I have been sworn. I'll just highlight the important things that may not have been covered by the applicant. Okay, the request was made clear to you, I'm sure. 6 stories, 5 living stories over parking. I don't have that. Oh, 69,844 square feet. The restaurant, 2,080 square feet. It's 2 parcels. They're both vacant now. Future land use is ROR. Zoning is both PDW and A1. There's the aerial you've already seen. The surrounding uses to the north is retail eating establishments. There's Walgreens, Applebee's, and Hungry Howie's, all zoned PDC. To the south, of course, is the Manatee River. East is Bushnell Creek and vacant land zoned PDMU, which is actually going to hearing very soon for a Ellenton Spring Hill Suites hotel, 6-story. To the west is a motel use zoned A1, and west of that is some multifamily uses also zoned A1. You already saw the site plan and the pretty version they provided. The 2 access points were shown by the applicant. Stormwater not shown, but I'm assuming it was going to be underground vault because there's not enough room for open stormwater. But as shown in the PSP, of course, the hotel is going to be about in the east half of the overall project area with the restaurant over at the southwest corner. They're requesting specific approvals for required yard setback from the wetland buffer, and Mr. Sivitz kind of went over that. Our environmental people have vetted what they're proposing to remediate any impacts that may occur to the wetland buffer itself. It's just when you encroach so close to the wetland buffer line, your heavy equipment is going to do some little bit of, damage to the wetland buffer. So they have the mitigation plan that Mr. Sivitz mentioned in place and stipulated to be, carried through once the construction is completed. The positives are that the timing appears to be consistent with the development trends in the nearby area. Also, adequate open space, parking areas, setbacks, and screening buffers have been provided to ensure compatibility with the surrounding uses. Negatives, the hotel building is proposed to be 6 stories with a height of 74 feet, which will be significantly taller than buildings in the area. And I did hear that sleep-in, I believe it was only 4 stories, but it was demolished, it was taken down. So that's not nearby to be a similar height. The project is also proposing encroachments into the 15-foot wetland buffer setback, as we discussed earlier. And the project is requesting relief from the cross-access requirement for entranceway projects. However, in addition to requiring the building to be in substantial conformance with the elevations that are provided and made as an Exhibit B to the ordinance, the building will also be required to meet all the criteria of Section 401.5, which is building
height compatibility. Also, the project will be required to be designed and constructed in accordance with the PSP as well as the sketch attached for the specific approval request letter, which will achieve the original intent of Section 4013E11. And then there are no opportunities to provide cross-access to adjacent properties. The project will be taking access off a frontage road anyway, which is 18th Avenue East. To the east, of course, is Bushnell Creek, so there is no access available to do cross-access. And to the west, as was mentioned, it's a established little motel use, and there's no way to do cross-access to that. So it's our opinion that the request for the rezone to PDC and PDCCH, together with the preliminary site plan and specific approvals with stipulations, are all in compliance with both the comprehensive plan and the land development code. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Satcher is on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will there be sidewalk improvements along with this project?
Yes, they are proposed along 18th Avenue, yes.
Okay,
They're
so-
shown on the preliminary site plan.
Someone would be able to leave the hotel and walk to the Starbucks or
Yes.
something like that?
Yes,
and
yes.
Might have to cross one of those back roads, but, I mean, I guess they're not as back road as they
Yes.
used to be.
Yeah, but yes, there will be external sidewalks, and I'm sure there's going to be some sort of internal, pedestrian ways for safe travel throughout the site itself, and like from the hotel to the restaurant and all that.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and I think the sleep in, I mean, it was, like you said, probably 4 stories sounds likely, but it hasn't been gone. I mean, it takes the state a while to do things. They're finally starting on those bridge or the access points there. I mean, they're doing a good job, don't get me wrong, but just a long process. But I think that probably should enter into our, to our decision-making here. And then this is just to put this out here while we're in this meeting, that I've been lobbying pretty hard for the administration to find a spot that we could take our water taxi to Ellenton so somebody could spend some time at factory shops, take a walk down to the water, and ride to the beach if they wanted to. So that's just to put that out there for anybody that might be listening. I'd be interested in something like that. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it.
I might add, maybe to answer that somewhat, the property that was taken by FDOT that was a portion of the old it's now Whiskey Joe's. There was talk about the county having a boat ramp there, so that could be a potential place. It's immediately adjacent to the I-75 portion that they took.
What I hear, I think it ended up being a little too small for us to do
Oh, okay.
what they were wanting to do, at least for a full ramp.
Okay.
But anyway.
Where'd you hear that?
Interesting.
I haven't heard that.
You haven't heard that?
No. I just talked to FDOT about it the day before yesterday.
Man, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I heard wrong. I don't remember where I heard it from. It was a while back.
News to me.
So that'd be amazing if we could.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a huge ramp. It would be like 20, 25 spaces, but we're still in discussions, yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's encouraging.
And it could be an on-off point for a water taxi, so potentially.
Great
If you
job,
can convince
Mr.
anyone-
Chair. Let's check you out.
You can convince people to go to Ellenton.
That's not hard these days, actually.
I'm just teasing.
You'd never run for something that's county.
Just proud. I represent my district proudly, and if I were to represent Ellenton, I would represent them with the same veracity I represent West Bradenton and the Islands. All right. So, any other questions for Dorothy? All right. Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion. Well, we'll go to public comment first. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number, what are we on, 10? On item number 10, the Holiday Inn Express. Okay. Seeing no one, we will ask the applicant if they have any final comments.
Good morning again. Once again, Brian Lichterman, and I have been sworn. I just want to note that we did hold a neighborhood workshop for this project, and all we received was positive input. And I think the fact that there's no one here indicates the fact that
Sure.
this is pretty well accepted by the neighborhood, and I think it's going to be a great inclusion within this area, and
Sure.
would request your approval.
I'm not sure why you didn't angle the hotel so that it would capture the sunset to the west, but that's not my decision. That's yours. So, but other than that, I have no other comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Cruz.
We already voted. It's up on the screen, but just to say, I think this is great. I think this is much needed here. I think the Spring Hill will also be much needed. I think this is a great opportunity to use that land for what it should be used for. I think it's going to be very successful, and I thank you for bringing it to us.
Yeah, agreed. We have a motion by Commissioner Cruz to approve, Madam Clerk, and that has been seconded by Commissioner Ron. We can hold the vote now, and it passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Congratulations. We'll move on to item number 11, which is also quasi, and I'll ask Mrs. DePaul to introduce that item.
Item number 11, PDR-22-16P, Mariposa Property Preliminary Site Plan. Dune FL Land 1 Sub LLC is the owner, and it's PLN 2205-0119, and we have Dorothy Rainey here also to present after the applicant.
This item is quasi. Anyone have any ex parte communication they would like to disclose at this time? Okay, hearing none. Who's here to represent the applicant? So, ma'am, please state your first name, last name, county of residence, and tell us if you've been sworn.
Laura Bartholomew. I'm with Ardura's Tampa office. I live in Polk County, and I have been sworn. So, I apologize. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, so we're going to have to do this old school. My thumb drive died. But, we are asking for an approved a new PSP approval. The rezoning is currently in force, as well as an ERP. Our site is located at 41, the corner of 41 and Bayshore. The school is located up here at Palm. And as part of this project, we are required to connect a sidewalk between our project and the school site so that there will be pedestrian connectivity and improved safety for students and residents in the area. As you can see, we are surrounded on the north and the south by single-family residential, and or residential. There is a cemetery on our west side, and then a couple of commercial parcels on the east side of Bayshore.
Excuse me, ma'am, can you speak closer to the mic?
You bet. Sorry. This is our proposed preliminary site plan. It's got 146 units on 21.1 acres, which is a density of approximately 6.9 units per acre. The future land use in the area is Res 9, which would allow up to 9 units per acre, but we're asking for less than that. The development to the north is currently zoned RSMH 6, which allows 6 units to the acre. And to the south, it's actually PDMH, and they are right around 6.5. So we're a little bit more dense than them, but not much. We are requesting 3 special approvals, an exemption from the 50% native habitat preservation. Instead, we are saving and enhancing other areas of the property. A second access to be emergency only, as well as to allow the dead-end streets to be longer than 800 feet. We are connecting to county water and sewer, and we will be providing pipes to convey water underneath the main roadway to allow the Tampa Gap drain to continue on to the Gulf, as well as perimeter surface drainage to make sure that we continue to accept any stormwater coming onto our property. At the Planning Commission, we did have several residents come up and ask questions and have a few concerns. So I thought we would kind of address a few of those here. The slide does have specific answers to some of the easier to answer questions. So number one, there was a question about property ownership along the south boundary. I have several slides for that, so I'll get back to that. We are not proposing this to be a 55-plus community. There was a concern about the sidewalks, which we mentioned we are required to build the sidewalks between our property and the school. There was some questions about animal habitat, so if there are any additional questions that you all want, we do have our environmental scientist here that can answer questions, who has also been sworn. There was, of course, a concern about density, and as stated earlier, we are very close in density to the surrounding neighborhoods. We've actually, from the previous approval, we were requesting 7.1 units per acre there, and now we're at 6.9. So this PSP actually has a lower requested density than the previous approval. Open space, we are providing 58% open space as opposed to the required 35%. Floodplain is always a concern, and through the process of doing our construction permitting, we are going to be required to fill in certain areas to meet the required finished floor elevations, but we will also be excavating in other areas to provide compensation. Traffic has always been a concern on most projects. The transportation analysis associated with this project that was submitted to staff only required a northbound left turn lane into our site, which also kind of helped to find where we could safely enter the project for our main entrance. And we do have an approved design exception for the location of that entrance. Drainage, of course, continues to be, and we do have an approved ERP that shows that there are rear yard swales on both the north and south of the property to allow any stormwater that's coming in from off-site property to be accepted and managed within our site as required. There was a question about dead tree removal. Clearly, the trees would be removed as allowed for permitting. The last question or comment they had was with respect to the buffers on the project. We have 15-foot green belts on the north, west, and south, and then on the east side we have the required 20-foot. And there will be a fence around the project. So So this is an overlay of our Alta boundary survey over the data that is shown in the property appraiser's website. And the dashed lines along the side, there's kind of a triangular piece that is drawn, is shown on the website that is not. It is based on the title work that was done with this project, as well as the legal descriptions that are associated with that on the property appraiser's website. They all reference the same south boundary line and north boundary line. So I do have highlighted copies that I'll enter into the record. Like I said, we do have a signed and sealed Alta survey. And then we've had 2 title searches done just to make sure that we were correct on this item after there was questions brought up at the Planning Commission. And then, and they all reference the same thing, and the call-outs match all of the call-outs on the Alta survey based on the legal description in the property appraiser's website. So we're happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Satcher is on the board with questions for the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this used to be in my district, and then my kids actually went to the school down the road for a little while. Great school, great administration there. So I believe the county has a really great sidewalk on the north side of the road there. So I don't know if they'll be able to get there on the south side of the road from where you're coming. Because of other projects, but hopefully they can set up some type of way to cross or something along those lines. Am I seeing, is there an emergency access onto 41 or Bay Shore there on the, I guess that would sort of be the southeast section? Or is there just one overall entrance and that's it?
No, there is an emergency access that is provided on at a location of an existing driveway on US 41. It will be emergency only. The main access for all of the residents will be off of Bay Shore.
Okay, and was that y'all's idea or staff's idea?
Given the proximity to this intersection, we discussed with staff various options, and we did actually have discussions with the FDOT prior to staff being comfortable with us showing that emergency access on 41. So we did get a preliminary okay from DOT in the form of an email that they would be willing to look at that subject to permitting.
So, as I mentioned, I'm relatively familiar with that area, and just looking at the planning on this, it looks like y'all, in my opinion, it looks like y'all did everything right. That was my one concern as I thought about it. I thought about, well, you don't need to be turning in that close to 41 because it'll back up as people make that turn, but you put it as far west as you could. That was smart, and you still have the emergency access. That was good planning. That intersection's no fun to go across as people come off that hill, but obviously that's not your purview. That's a state road. So I don't have any other questions or concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. No other commissioners on the board, so thank you, ma'am. And who is presenting this for staff? Is this just the Dorothy Day? Okay, this is the Dorothy Day.
Yes.
It is.
All right. Dorothy Rennie for staff, and I have been sworn. And I will add for Commissioner Satcher that they are providing a 5-foot sidewalk along their frontage on Bayshore, and there may be a way to look to use sidewalk deferral funds to connect to the, to be able to get to the school. Since this may have school-age children, it would be a good thing, and it's probably, if it's within 2 walking miles, we normally require some connection to be provided. So anyway, I will go quickly through just the highlights that are not covered by the applicant on my presentation. So plan development residential, and as the applicant had mentioned, it was already previously approved for 150 single-family attached townhomes. You've already seen all that, the specific approvals. And also, the emergency access was a requirement for a second means of access. And being that they didn't have the space, and like she said, they discussed it with FDOT and with staff, and that's where the emergency access comes in. It's the second means of access for over 100 residential units. So the first one is about, there's a requirement to preserve at least 50% of native habitat where they're able to. So there is not a whole lot of it, as well as it's difficult to preserve it. They have some constraints with the gap drain going straight through it, and a lot of stormwater and floodplain compensation areas that have to be placed somewhere. So we're recommending approval of that. And then the section 1001 is the second means of access, and they've provided it through the emergency access that they presented to you. And it was approved by the fire marshal and all the emergency responding staff. And then the third one is 1001.4A, and they have 2 cul-de-sacs that exceed 800 feet. That's also been approved, preliminarily by the emergency responders that would need to, possibly use the bump outs they're going to provide to turn around in the event of some blockage in the road or whatever. So they don't have to back up all the way. You've already seen all that. The site, the surrounding uses. To the north, there's some office uses zoned neighborhood commercial medium and a mobile home park zoned RSMH6. To the south is another mobile home park that's planned development mobile home. To the east are residential uses zoned GC and HC. It appears they may have like a business on their site along with their residents on a few of them. And then, of course, to the west is a cemetery zoned A1. You already saw the site plan that's presented by the applicant. The 2 access points, one on Bayshore Road is a full access, and then the one on US 41 is the specific approval item that's an emergency right in, right out. Stormwater is shown along both the north and south side of the gap drain, as well as a floodplain compensation area. It shows the internal roads as well as locations of all the units on the preliminary site plan. Also, they're going to have an amenity center in the west and east ends of the stormwater facility in the northwest quadrant of the project. Positives, it's already approved, was already approved for the rezone to PDR with the 150 units in 2005. So this is just a little bit less. Also, the project's providing 58% open space at 12.24 acres compared to the minimum 35%, which is 7.38 acres. And the project proposes a public playground, which will serve as a focal point for the neighborhood. Negatives, the project is providing the required second means of access as an emergency-only access. Also, the project's requesting specific approval to allow 2 cul-de-sacs that exceed the 800-foot maximum length at 1176 and 1375 linear feet. Mitigating with the request for specific approval to allow the second means to be emergency access only. The intent of the required second means is still being met, as the applicant will be required to accommodate the requirements and meet standards of the fire district as well as emergency responders. They're going to have clicker for access to open and close the gate and that sort of thing. Also, the alternative design proposed by the applicant for the 2 cul-de-sacs was approved by the fire marshal and will include a truck turning radius analysis to show that the fire truck access is provided with the T turnaround design layout. Staff concludes that the proposed amendment to the preliminary site plan application, as well as the related specific approval requests and stipulations provided, can be found to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land development code. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. No commissioners on the board. We're going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to speak on item number 11? Anyone like to come forward to speak on the Bay Shore Road project? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close public comment, and we will ask the applicant if they have any final comments they'd like to make. I forgot who the applicant was. There you are.
Yes, I just had one point of clarification. The condition of this project's approval is to provide that 5-foot sidewalk connectivity from the north property line of our site up to connect to the elementary school at the corner. So we're required to do that construction. I know there's a county project that's on the other side, but this will allow our residents and residents in this area to have that sidewalk connection.
All right, thank you, ma'am. No one's on the board for questions for the applicant, so any final statement, any final comments from Ms. Rainey? Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Ron to approve. It has been seconded by Van Ostenbridge. We can cast our votes at this time. And Madam Clerk, the motion passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Van Ostenbridge. Very forgettable commissioner on the board there. Okay, so it's right at 10. Before we open the can of worms, that is number 12, should we take 5 minutes and then come back and take up 12? I'm sure 12 is going to be the smoothest item of the entire day. There will be a presentation. All right, let's take 5 minutes before we open 12 then. It's 9:58. We will return at, let's say, 9:53. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're on our last item today for our land use meeting, item number 12. Mrs. DePaul, if you would please introduce item number 12.
Item number 12, PDMU-18-11ZG, Riverfront PDMU with RFT Holdings LLC as the owner, PLN 1806-0051. This is a quasi item, and we have Marshall Robinson to present after the applicant.
Thank you, ma'am. Who's here to represent the applicant? Oh, I'm sorry, this is quasi. Does anybody have any ex parte communication they would like to disclose at this time? Okay, hearing none. Who's here to represent the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob Gauze with Gauze Associates, Manatee County resident. I have not been sworn. I'm actually joined here by Mr. Ed Vogler as well as the owners, and I don't think
Okay.
any of us have been sworn.
Those of you who have not been sworn who plan to speak during this final item, please stand and be sworn by the clerk at this time.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and representations you are about to make to the Board of County Commissioners are truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you. You step to the podium, please state your name, county of residence, and
Thank you. And again, I'm Bob Gauze. I'm a Manatee County resident, and I have been sworn. And if we can put up the PowerPoint, thank you very much. This project's been around here for quite a while, and it is the Riverfront PDMU project, and it is located, let me see if this, it's located on the south side of US Highway 301, actually just a little bit further down from that hotel that you were just addressing a couple of items ago. It's about 3/4 of a mile down US Highway 301. It is sandwiched between Palm Grove Mobile Home Park and Raintree Inlets, which is, it shares a canal with on its east side, and the Manatee River on the south side. The project's 11.1 acres, and as you can see, it's in the ROR future land use category. And on its 11.1 acres, under the ROR category, the property has allowed up to 32 dwelling units per acre, a floor area ratio of 1. And, you know, there's been some discussion about that. You can see also that, you know, we kind of got the FDOT pond right there by us. There was some discussion, within the ROR, you have some provisions about coastal evacuation area, but in this project, as you can see, most of the site is located outside any flood zone. It's actually kind of a high bluff, used to be owned by Don Mattingly, and it's got basically a seawall along the Manatee River. The request, well, I'm going to get into the specific approval we're talking about. We've asked for a couple of specific approvals, and one of the ones that I'm going to talk about, Mr. Vogler will talk about some of the others, but we're asking for a waiver from the strict adherence to the entranceway tree preservation requirement. And this is something that's been in the code for literally decades, and it literally hasn't worked for decades, because the code says that in the entranceway, you must preserve 75% of all trees over 24-inch DBH. And in all the years I've been doing projects, I don't know of any of my projects that actually were able to strictly comply with that. And if you think about it, if you have 3 large trees in the middle of your site, you can't remove any of them. And staff has historically also understood that and worked with us. And we met with staff on the site back in February 26th of 2021, and we talked to them about the fact that that doesn't work. And they acknowledge that. The issue is that their interpretation is that the board has to authorize them to work with developers, and that's consistent with the position they've taken for the last several years, quite frankly. And so what we're asking is requesting permission to let staff deviate from that requirement, work on something that makes more sense for the site that we're working with. So that is actually what that specific approval request is for. I want to tell you a little bit about the site. As you can see in the top left corner, that blue pond, that's actually an FDOT pond. It is not part of the project site. It's 1.9 acres. It was taken by the FDOT through eminent domain. I actually worked on that project back when it was owned by Mr. Mattingly. And on the north side, you have 301 and general commercial property, also in the ROR. On the west side of our property, you have the Palm Grove Mobile Home Park, which actually we have, I believe y'all received an email from the owner supporting our project. South side, you see the Manatee River. On our east side, you have 68th Avenue, which is a private street upon which we have an easement on. And then you have a canal, a canal coming up in there that separates our project from Raintree Inlets. I think there's about 7 single-family residents on the Raintree Inlets facing that same canal. The proposal is for 2 parcels, parcel A and parcel B. We're going to have two means of access off of 301, and we have actually looked at the FDOT standards. I think the client actually met with the FDOT years ago. We believe, based on the fact that it's a Class 5 roadway, 45-mile-an-hour posted speed limit, I think a 250-foot separation between driveways, right in, right out, we should be able to have 2 access points on US Highway 301. Actually, right now, each parcel has that, has an access. We know that'll change. But we're proposing on the parcel A, which is about 3 acres, 3.1 acres. 3 acres is 40,000 square feet of non-residential development with a maximum height of 3 stories. Currently, the portion of it that's 1.3 acres would allow actually about 56,000 square feet and 4 stories. We're not asking for that. We're saying 40,000 square feet, 3 stories. On the remaining parcel, we're asking that on that 8 acres, we're saying we want no more than 250 dwelling units, and we want no more than 103,000 square feet of non-residential. And it's mixed use, so that works within the guidelines. The proposed FAR on both parcels is about 0.3, and the overall density proposed is about 0.22 dwelling units per acre. So that's sort of how we've got it set up. We're also asking for up to 80 boat slips for marina, which we worked out with staff that if there was going to be any transient slips, like if they build a restaurant, that those would be located on the west side of the property, not on the east side, to keep them further away from the single family. And one thing that's changed since this went to the Planning Commission is we originally were asking for up to 9 stories, and we reduced the request down to 6 stories of a maximum height of 6 stories. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Vogler.
Thank you, Bob. Commission, good morning. My name is Ed Vogler, Manatee County. I have been sworn. It's a pleasure to see you all this morning. Thank you, Bob, for an excellent summary. I'd like to just start by saying that I haven't had the pleasure of seeing all of these board members to talk about general development plans, but general development plans present both real opportunities and also some planning issues. And part of what we're talking about today is the planning theory of using a general development plan as a planning tool. And I know that Manatee County is not unmindful of this, because this is exactly some of the flexibility that you sought on your own project at 64 and Lena Road, where you approved the GDP so that you could identify uses, you could establish guardrails, and you can plan to the market as you went forward. And that's the type of theory that we're talking about here today. You have a general development plan which includes guardrails, significant guardrails that guide any future approval. Part of those guardrails include 28 stipulations, and it includes a new stipulation that we want you to add, which provides further limitation. And that stipulation, when we get to asking for your approval, is 401.5A, building height compatibility, and what it provides is for an additional 20-foot setback for every additional story over 3. And so that's not in the guardrails today, but we want to propose that as an additional guardrail because it's good for planning. I'd like to have the site plan put up, the one that had been up there. Yes. I'd like to talk for a few minutes about this. There are 7 directly affected property owners on the east side of the canal that you see that runs essentially north-south on this drawing. And we're very mindful and concerned about those folks as well. And so that's one of the reasons that we add additional stipulation that causes for further setback. And one of the other things that's true on site when you look at the aerial photographs, that many of the large trees that are predominant in that area are located within the setback area, and they'll not be affected, they'll be preserved. That's part of the negotiation that will go on between the environmental staff and our client, because our goal, of course, will have to get through the staff, but we'll need your authorization to allow them to meet with us again and to negotiate the parameters of preservation. And that's simply something that we need to have in terms of a special approval. What you also see on this drawing to the west is a very large blue area that is an FDOT pond. Now, that property is owned by FDOT. It is not owned by the applicant, and it is not part of our project. However, it was taken from the land by the FDOT, and it is immediately contiguous and adjacent to our property. And our client has an easement over that property to maintain it, to landscape it, to maintain it, and to use it. Not to build on it and not to improve it in any significant way, but other through landscaping and integration of the pond into the aesthetic of our property. And so what we've asked you to consider is a reduction in the on-site open space requirement, to reduce by about 10% in recognition of the fact and the proximity of that pond. And if you do the math, the pond adds 17% to open space. So the reduction request on site would be 10, but in recognition of 17% added by the perpetual use of that pond and our maintenance of that pond. So the planning strategy pursued by these landowners is the following. They would like to obtain a plan approval that identifies for the first time what are the allowable uses on the property, what are the allowable densities and intensities, and what are the physical constraints on the ground for design of the property. And this is a very logical planning opportunity so that when you do have that approval and when you know what those design limitations are and the constraints map that applies, you have your architect design a building and perhaps a very unique building that could be vertically integrated with interesting architecture and on-site amenities such as a private marina and a waterfront restaurant. Integrating the FDOT pond into the landscape planning is permitted and would be, in our view, very wise master planning for the site. So this is the purpose of the GDP planning process. And I would say in one of the reviews by the various officials in the county, it was noted, and this is a quote, "It should be noted that some of the remaining staff comments are typically handled at the preliminary or final site plan review stage of the development project and not at the GDP level of development review." And this, of course, illustrates some of the issues that exist between having a GDP and having a PSP. And, historically, it's easier to review a PSP, and that's true, but not everybody knows, particularly in an integrated site, exactly what the PSP will look like until the users come forward. But let me step back for one more second and talk a little bit more about planning theory. You hear talk about the future land use category all the time. Oh, well, it's a Res 9 or it's a Res 3 or UF3 or something. This is in the ROR, Retail Office Residential. Now, that's a very intense land use category, and it allows 32 dwelling units per acre, and actually, under certain bonuses, could extend to 45 dwelling units per acre. The mere fact of the ROR future land use category suggests that everyone understands that there has to be increased height on buildings. To achieve the planning goal of the ROR, there needs to be an intensification of the use. So several years ago, and our client was involved in the process, Manatee County initiated a mapping amendment to create all of this area as an ROR, and including the area where the hotel you just approved is located, and extending all the way up to our site and past. And so I'd like to go to the, let's see, I guess I do it myself, all right? So I'm going to come back to that one. This is the ROR painting that shows you where the ROR is on the property. And you can see that our property is on the south side of 301 and backs up to the river. And it's suggested, and we don't really agree with the characterization, that this is on the east end of the ROR. The ROR actually goes past our site, as you can see, and terminates at areas where there are existing uses. If you look at the other side of the road, you can see that the ROR continues for an extended period of time, and even on the top right corner, about 4,000 feet away, you have another ROR designation. And so what you're seeing here is that you're seeing here what people ask for all the time. Why don't we plan for the future? Why don't we plan? And so immediately to our west is a mobile home park. Nothing wrong with a mobile home park. In 1989, when the comp plan was adopted, it pretty much outlawed mobile home parks, and there haven't been any new ones since. And I think when you put an ROR, when you, the county, puts ROR over the top of the mobile home park, we're saying to ourselves as a community that that mobile home park isn't the long-term use for that property. And let me just say, before someone is concerned about the mobile home owners who rent their space from the landowner who supports our project, there is a state law called Chapter 723 that protects the mobile home owners in the event that the land use is ever going to change in the future. So those are some of the dynamics that are in play when you look at the impacts of this project on this site. So our traffic engineer is Michael Yates, and he's been in front of this commission many times, and he's very skilled. He could not be with us today, but some comments on traffic. There is a traffic impact statement summary that is prepared by Michael Yates and accepted by the transportation staff. We have met with the DOT, and they've been very cooperative and willing to help us resolve access issues. They want to do that because they have all these current access points. They usually consolidate them and work on a sort of a master plan. And that's something, if we get authorization to go forward, we'll be certainly doing first thing. So one of the objections at the Planning Commission was in the northeast part of that drawing, or top right part of that drawing, you'll see a connection to 68th Drive East, and the neighbors were objecting to the use of that roadway. Now, a little bit of background, there is a private easement between those parties that benefit at least the 3 acres that's in the northeast corner. So some of the legal questions are, well, can you use that easement to service 11 acres versus 3 acres? And I'm sorry for all this, but generally speaking, these private party matters are not adjudicated by the board, and they're left to be adjudicated by a court if that's necessary, or by agreement of the parties. But we've gone further. We have proposed a stipulation accepted by the staff and included in their proposed report that we would not take access off of that roadway until we've established that access either by a judicial determination or by an agreement. And so we feel that that's very responsive. We believe that we can meet the 2 means of access requirements on 301 as shown. And so if we're not right about that, then we don't have a project. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about compatibility. Let's see. So, page 16 of the staff report, quote, in the opinion of staff, it cannot be determined how the massing of structures, parking, lighting, reduction to open space, tree protection, and upland preservation area will impact the residential uses to the east and the west. So I'd like to take a little bit of issue with that. First of all, you can do a use-to-use comparison, right? So you've got residential, hotel, potential office, potential neighborhood commercial on this site. You got a mobile home park on that site. You got 7 single-family residences immediately adjacent and another 15 or so in a neighborhood. You can analyze that. Use-to-use analysis, that's able to be done. Building location is ascertainable, any building, because the setback criteria are specifically identified. And if you look at this drawing, you can see the buffers and the impact of the 401.5A setbacks, because all of the setbacks will be identified on a drawing, which is a constraints map, just like that. So you can look at that, and you can say, well, we don't like that, but you can certainly ascertain it. If a 6-story building was built all on parcel B, all on the brown area that you see there, the projection would be that it would be a 80,585 square foot footprint, okay? Because you know there's a maximum intensity for the site. So when you lay it out, you say, well, wait a minute, how big could that building be? And if it was 6 stories, all 6 stories, be 80,000 roughly square foot footplate. That's 23% of the site, 23% of the parcel B site. So these are knowns, these are objective criteria. And so in our view, it is not true to say that you cannot determine for an analytical purposes the massing of the structures. It's deterministic in part. Now, parking, of course, is either in the building in a structured parking or it's on grade. Lighting, we have a very rigid lighting ordinance where you cannot invade the property line. So you have to shield it, you have to design it, you have to get the plan approved. So that can certainly be understood. Tree preservation, how it impacts the neighbors, your staff is going to do that in the field with every tree that's there and the preservation area that would be required. And so all of these things are deterministic and objective, and we're requesting your approval today. There are one revision that we would ask that you consider from the recommended stipulations. We would like for you to delete stipulation A, the first sentence of stipulation A1. It requires us to bring a preliminary site plan back to this board for another round of discussions, and we'd prefer to have this administratively approved within the context of the guardrails that I've discussed with you. And we would like you to add to your approval that the applicant will comply with the requirements of LDC 401.5A. At the same time, we'd like you to approve the special approvals that we've requested. I've explained the open space. The trees preservation and the upland preservation are all the type of things that the staff routinely works out in the field, and your authorization and direction to empower them to do that is what we're asking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So I'm the only commissioner on the board for questions for the applicant. You adjusted from 9 stories to 6. I have 250 residential units and 80 slips on my paperwork here. Is that still accurate? You stated the number of units, and I don't think you said 250. Sorry, it's 250 is what I have. I don't think you said 250.
I didn't, but it is.
It is 250, okay. So 250 units, and it's still 80 slips, and I mean, that doesn't really bother me. I just wanted to confirm that. Is there a decel lane? I know you worked that out with FDOT, but you have the 2 access points to 301. Is there a decel lane worked in for each of those?
There will have to be because of safety criteria.
That's what I assumed. Okay. You know, the commercial spot down there, I haven't heard from staff yet, but that doesn't really bother me at the moment, the ROR. I mean, you're kind of at the end, but it doesn't matter if you're at the end or not. At the end, you're still in it, so it doesn't really jump out at me. The pond, I find interesting. You say that's something that can be done. FDOT purchased the pond from, I assume, Mattingly at the time, but the property owner, did they purchase all entitlements that come with that parcel when they purchased the pond?
Well, they bought fee simple title to it, but he was very concerned about that and how it would impact his ability to use and sell the remaining property, so he negotiated an easement with them. And, that's atypical. I mean, that's not every day. DOT is sort of a big dog,
Sure.
And they come in and tell you what they want. And so, they negotiated an easement, and It's an easement agreement and allows us to maintain it. Landscape.
An easement for maintenance purposes.
Maintenance, landscape, beautification.
But outside of maintenance
Outside of the
purposes,
ownership.
do you have any entitlements to that property, that parcel?
Commissioner, of course, I call an easement an entitlement.
Sure.
A big entitlement.
As do I.
But in terms of development rights, no. We don't have transfer of density, we don't have transfer of intensity or anything like that. But we're also proposing 22 units an acre rather than 32.
You are. I don't have a problem with the height of the building either, to be honest with you. That doesn't necessarily scare me. My concern is, we'll get to the site plan, but my concern is, I don't think you have enough surface parking, according to my math, to make this work. Are you committing to a parking garage? Maybe you were and I didn't hear that correctly. I heard you like glaze over the term parking structure, but I didn't hear that as a commitment.
Yeah, so I think it's not a commitment because you don't know how it's going to be actually designed. But what you do know is you have to meet the parking criteria. There's no reduced parking waiver here, right?
Right.
So if you're going to do on-grade parking, you're going to limit the size of your building.
Sure.
If you can hit the real vision, which is an integrated building with hotel and resort, right, style living and condo and so forth. If you hit that, and you see many of those examples, around the area, including what downtown Bradenton is talking about doing, all right? That always contemplates structured parking. So, Commissioner, it's not a commitment, but if you ask for intensification of use in an ROR and you ask for height, you're sort of committing to it.
That's what I'm feeling as well, and I'm kind of wanting you to commit to that, because again, that height, that use, you're not scaring me away. I'm being honest with you here, but I need some commitments, and obviously when it comes to a site plan, you know where I stand on that. Coming back for a site plan is sort of a non-starter for me.
I've heard that.
Yes, sir. And I think you got away with it last time because it was a hospital and the optics wouldn't be good for people to vote against a hospital.
I got away with it.
But I am going to strongly encourage this board to require you come back with a site plan. Okay, that's all for me. So the order of the board is Satcher, Ron, and Baugh. Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the map that you were showing us, the overhead, someone coming south on 301, are they going to be able to turn directly into this? Because that's kind of what it looks like there, but that cut does not exist right now.
Yeah, that's, sadly, at this stage, that's kind of an artist's rendering, really. And so what we really think, based upon the discussions we have, is we'll negotiate a directional left with the FDOT. Directional left is essentially a fairly narrow lane that comes off into the median and turns left into the site. That is most likely.
Okay. And they're redoing that road right now.
No, we've got to get in the game, and we've got to start talking to them.
Yeah, I don't like having an artist rendering that's not. Or if it's different than what exists, at least mention that. Maybe you did, though. And then, what do we have as far as, the chair mentioned that, we would want to see a PSP. Run in worst-case scenarios. There's a lot of best-case scenarios I can see with this property. But run in a worst-case scenario, everyone to the east ends up with 6 stories right up against that property line. I don't know that it looks to me, just looking at the overhead on the satellite, that there's a good bit of vegetation there already. So I'm not sure they have a perfect unobstructed view currently, but sure would hate to put 6 stories right next to every single house right there. Is there any type of commitment to keep things to the west or even south?
Well, yes, because you end up having a better view corridor if you locate a building that way.
Right.
But I don't accept entirely your premise for just a second. First of all, you can't have a 6-story building because of our commitment to set further setbacks, right? So it's like a birthday cake. There'll be setbacks. So there can't be a 6-story building on the property line. There could be a 3-story building today on the property line.
Okay.
And what always.
But it's
Yeah,
not
well,
my, I mean, I'm still relatively, still getting a feel for all this, but it's not my first rodeo. I bet your property line is your property line in the middle of the canal or at the edge of the canal?
No, I think it's at the edge of the canal, but yes, we have edge canal, right. And so, look, I don't want to argue with you. I just want to.
An extra 20 feet per story, so an
I
extra
think
40
that,
feet.
if there was a request to make a further commitment, a building commitment, that's something that could be considered. I mean, I understand that. But, Commissioner, I had it in my notes, and I didn't say it, and I wanted to say it, and I do now. We've looked at all of the view sheds for those homes. There's no view shed of the river there. And there's no view shed that's going to be impaired.
So right now, okay, the setback there, you're saying if you were to do 6 stories, you got 60 feet, 20 feet for each additional over 3. And then what is what's the setback beyond that? 60 feet plus what?
Is it 30 and then 60? Yeah, so
90
you've
feet.
got 30, from the property line just generally, where all the trees will be retained. And then to get to 6 stories, you got to go 60 more.
So I guess for me, I would rather tell you this now than later, that when we do see a PSP, that's what would concern me. Is if every single house has 6 stories as close as you can get them on that western boundary or eastern boundary. That would be disappointing. Because what you said is true as far as the ROR and where it's at. But of course, there's a reason why they drew this, this neighborhood out of that. And it's because those are nice homes, and I know that they don't own this land, they own their land. But if we could try to be considerate of our neighbors there, I think that would be wise going forward. Other than that, I don't have any grave concerns.
Mr. Chairman, if you allow, just because it'll be an expansive and I'll have a reduced rebuttal. If we're going to come back with a PSP, you're going to see that. Because this project presents another little quandary that we've enjoyed, which is we have concept plans that we've developed. We've shared them with the staff. And they meet all the criteria you just said.
Great.
But you can't have a concept plan at a GDP. That was another one of our debates, remember? And so, the process needs, I think there should be concept plans. And they should be able to be shown to you. And you can say, tie the approval to a concept plan. But like when we present the concept plans, that's a non-starter through the process. We should discuss that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I thank you for clearing that up. So I'm not making the request that you provide us with a site plan today by any means. My request is that you have to come back to this board for final approval that includes a site plan, so that this board does vote ultimately on the site plan. That's all I'm asking. Yes. Commissioner Baugh and then Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this property has come before the Board of County Commissioners before. A little different this time, I understand that. I am concerned, I will tell you, in looking at this, the special approvals that you're asking for are all very important, I think, and I think a lot of it comes because of its location for me. The open space, trees, and Mr. Vogler, I know you, and I have the utmost respect for you as an attorney, you know that. But I am concerned about your comment about, and I heard someone else mention it, the site plan. That you didn't want it coming back to this board, you wanted it just to go to staff. Well, I take issue with that, and I'll tell you why. I don't like the process. You and I have actually discussed it in the past. I mean, my thoughts on it. But I think this board, particularly now that we're starting to see more development on the water as we are, this board needs to be involved in these decisions, and we need to take a close look. And we need to do more than that, I know. I mean, I'm not taking away from this board has some decisions to make on how we move forward, with the LDC process, et cetera. But you know, these are things that I am concerned about. And right off the bat, I got an issue with your special approvals. I'm sorry. I am, and from what I've heard from other commissioners up here, I do share their concerns. So I just wanted to ask you about the site plan situation. I mean, for me, I realize we've got a terrific staff, and you know, Lord have mercy, you know, I don't take away from that, and I appreciate all of them. But at the same time, ultimately, we have that determination that we need to make. And it kind of takes away from, you know, our job to our citizens when that process is taken away from us. And I don't like that. I don't like that happening, never have. What is your reason, if you don't mind me asking, that you really would rather have staff, you know, approve the site plan? And why aren't we seeing it? Just, I know at this process, you don't have to show it to us. But, I mean, I would think with this property and the issues that's, you know, come up before, that it might have been worthwhile.
So the direct answer to your question is I enjoy planning theory a lot, but I am an attorney that is constrained by my client. And they would prefer not to have a trip back to the board. But having said that, just threw my client under the bus, but it's a direct answer.
Well, I mean, I want the truth.
Hold on just
you
a
know,
second.
I appreciate that.
Let's stay focused on this for 1 second. But the good part about coming back is that the questions of the special approvals, you know, and allowing us to work with your staff and putting together the plan, then you know in your mind you can support that today because you're going to see the results of that. So that's what I say.
And Mr. Vogler, I really appreciate your response. You know I do.
Yeah, I know.
But I feel like what we're being asked to do is give our approval on a lot of stuff, and then, you know, I hate to put it this way, but then your client can decide, well, I want to go this way, and this way, maybe, you know. And for us to do the approvals that you're asking for today, I just don't feel like we've really got the information we need. For me, I can't speak for others, but for me. So I appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
Always.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why we can't have concept plan. I mean, it just makes it much more visual, even if it's not, we're not requiring you to adhere to it. It's a lot easier to see, okay, here's a concept of where footprints could be, and this is why this conceptually makes sense. I think we should definitely change that, even if you hand draw it on a napkin and hand it to us. My question is relative to these access points, because I heard something a little different relative to staff's views of this, and we'll hear staff at some point. There's a lot of theoretical access points here, one of which is an assumption that a median's going to be cut. One's an assumption that DOT is going to give us 2 access points that close together on 301. One's an assumption the court's going to say, yes, this easement for a small parcel of land can therefore extend to a larger piece of land just via common ownership. What assurances do we have? Because we had something similar to this. I don't recall if you were there on Cortez. And I had an exception to that particular request because they didn't have any guarantee they were going to be able to get the access, and their alternative was to go through another neighborhood. And the worst case scenario was everyone was going to have, who was going east was going to have to make a U-turn and come back and tie up the road. So that was my problem with that. If you don't get that median cut, you're going to have the same thing. Everyone coming from Fort Hammer, which is going to be a major road and doesn't have an access point to cut through on that median, if you don't get it, is going to have to continue down past this property and make a U-turn, or wherever the U-turn be, 29th or Victory or something like that on that side of it. So, you know, where's our assurance that everything we approve is contingent upon getting these access points that you're conceptually implying exist?
Yes, there are 2 protections. One is, if you approve it with the stipulation that requires the PSP to come back, you'll see that. And it'll have to be illustrated. Second thing is, there's a very hard FDOT permit stipulation in the approval stipulations. It's virtual control. I mean, it's you know, yeah, I mean, yes, we do meet the FDOT standards. I mean, we wouldn't even be in this theoretical discussion about. But you know, Commissioner, if you don't have local zoning, they won't even talk to you. What's your use?
Understood.
How many cars?
Understood.
What's it gonna be? What's the stacking required? So you come here to get the local zoning, and the local zoning official says, well, you know, we don't have the FDOT assurance. Fair point, but they get layered and integrated together, and that's what happens.
Do you feel, when you come back with a site plan, which I 100% agree with, that needs to be, especially on waterfront, I mean, if we're going to deal with smart growth and planned growth for Manatee County, our waterfront is critically important to the growth and success of Manatee County. I think we should have a little more involvement than administratively approving a suburban office on a couple of acres in the middle of nowhere. This is our waterfront. There's only so many square feet of it. Do you feel you'll have an answer, or at least an idea of an answer from DOT or relative to the private road prior to that coming back, or is that still going to be conditioned upon future?
I think we'll have a meaningful answer. Okay. It will not be an FDOT permit because it doesn't work that way.
Understood.
Can I show you the concept plan? So, you know, we've worked on several concept plans, but just, this is the one that we brought here today. And you can see all the buildings are completely separate from the residential neighborhood. You know, it's a concept plan.
No,
You're not approving that
but
one.
this is incredibly helpful. First off, as Commissioner Satcher, I believe it was Commissioner, talking about the west side versus east. I do feel there's a difference between west side and east because the west side is still part of the ROR, and we're arguing the ROR is high intensity, and that eventually will be ROR one way or the other at some point. The east side is not. The east side, granted, R9 is not low intensity, but it's not ROR, so I'd prefer to see it. This is incredibly helpful. And as the chair said, I have no fundamental problem with anything you're doing. I just want to make sure people can get in and out of the thing. I agree our waterfront should be used for stuff like that. So I'm not fighting you on this. I just want to make sure it's done properly.
And if you think about it, we took off the access to the east to that road, which we have an easement for, so that we can avoid the argument that you're going to hear from my friend Patty Petroff, who represents the Rain Tree people, right? So we took it off. We said, look, we're not going to fight with you about it at the public hearing. We'll either make a deal, we'll get a signalized intersection there, we'll work with FDOT. They'll love it. I have every confidence that neighborhood will like what we're planning to do.
Okay.
If we can ever get past this stage.
They do have a good argument because that's a lot of cars cutting through a private road.
They have a good argument, and we recognize it, and that's why we did what we did.
All right, because it's still private. I'm not taking someone's private road and forcing them to use it to gain an access point for a waterfront resort.
I know that.
Yeah, okay.
I know that.
But otherwise, I don't have a problem with this.
I'll just weigh in quickly. Commissioner Satcher, twice we've had projects, and I don't know if you support this project or not, but there were projects that, actually one project I supported, the other one I voted against. But I reached out to FDOT because the project passed, the one that Commissioner Cruz is referencing on Cortez Road, that project passed. And I reached out to FDOT, told them how important I felt having the cut in the median was and allowing that access. And both times, no problem, Commissioner, we'll take care of it. And both times it ended up going through. So, you know, like you said, it's sort of chicken and the egg with FDOT and the county. But if it is a project you support and it is something that you want, you can weigh in with FDOT, and they're not by any means required, but we seem to have a good relationship with them, and I've had success. Yeah. Okay. All right. Marshall, you always seem to be the guy for these fun ones. So we'll move on to staff presentation. I do. I think he thrives on this stuff.
He does thrive on it. Look at him
All right.
smiling.
Yeah, he can't help it.
Yeah. Undurable.
Floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, Marshall Robinson. I'm a staff planner and I have been sworn. As you can imagine, I do have a pretty thorough presentation put together, and some of the points that were made by the commissioners might not have to be hit on as hard since the discussion was had. We all know where the property is. It's on 301. And here are the requests. This is where you see the property broken down into two parcels. The parcel A along the north road frontage of 301 has 3.1 acres. They're asking for 40,000 square feet of non-residential uses that could include retail, office, restaurant, hotel. We also had a schedule of permitted uses for the project proffered by the applicant that would lay over A and B, B being 8 acres with 103,000 square feet of non-residential with 250 residential units and 80 slips for a boat marina. The specific approvals, I will stop here and say what I have to say about these because it did come up with the commissioners. Commissioner Ball had raised the specific approvals for the open space and the tree preservation. And one of the talking points about the specific approval, not that staff has any issues with the specific approval request, as the board knows, we see these specific approval requests quite frequently. However, the difference between a GDP and a PSP, at least the PSP would let us know how, we would have a tree survey, so we'd be able to identify just how many of the trees were not being preserved and what mechanisms were being to mitigate those, whether it was replace or pay. The open space, we are in the coastal planning area and we're also in the entranceway, which have more restrictive open space requirements. And staff just feels like kicking those items down the road to a PSP and not and an FSP where it's under administrative approval. Because, you know, open space and tree preservation and even the upland preservation, which is the third specific approval being requested, those are items that can help achieve a property toward more compatibility depending on where the way the open space is utilized and where the trees are being preserved and what uplands are being preserved. Those items could be strategically used on a site plan to help achieve compatibility with separation, screening, et cetera. This is a look at the future land use map. The applicant's right. They are coming in under their maximum allowances. 32 per acre is the max density, and they are asking for 22.5 per acre, and the FAR is up to a 1.0 in the ROR, whereas they are asking for a 0.3. We did blend the density and the FAR over the three parcels. The three parcels being shown here is PDR, A1, and GC as the existing zoning classifications on the property. Here's a look at those parcels and their zoning. There's the rain tree that lit up to the east, single-family residential neighborhood, and to the west, the previously mentioned mobile home park. And then here we have the zoning of that surrounding area where we have residential on both sides. This is a look at the future land use map, and I'll stop here and talk about this for just a second. We agree with the board. The ROR is a very robust future land use category, and it allows for a myriad of uses, intensities, and densities that are elevated more than any other future land use category in the code, except for maybe the mixed use land use category. However, the code has policies in it, or not the code, but the comp plan has policies in it that talk about mitigation of impacts. And it also talks about transition of uses when your scenario of development presents incompatibilities, which is what we have here with the amount of commercial and the amount of intensity and density being used. So we were looking for more of a transition. And this site plan here doesn't really give us much to go on, and I don't know that the board would be comfortable leaving it up to staff on such an important, prominent piece of property in our county along the river to make decisions and judgments as to how this thing would fully be developed without the board's knowledge and input and oversight of what's being approved, because this plan here doesn't really achieve much mitigation techniques for this superior design that our code speaks about so much when we're talking about planned development. I mean, it's supposed to be a development that is planned. And the height compatibility diagram that was submitted and revised when it went back down to 6 stories, again, this is just a graphic representation of our minimum requirements for 401.5. The applicant had mentioned talking about wanting to stip 401.5A, and I don't know that we stipulate requirements that are already required by the code. I think we're kind of discouraged to not echo the code and stipulations, but maybe Ms. Schink can help me out there with that one. This is a look at the property. I've got some pictures that kind of give some orientation and just give us a better feel and look of what's going on with the property. The applicant did touch on the FDOT parcel here, the 1.9 acres for the FDOT parcel. It's understood that they're not going to count that toward any open space requirements that's required of 11.1 acres on the open space, even though the open space is requested to be reduced. And then the other thing I would say is that the ROR, if this property was surrounded by ROR, I don't think that we would have much concern. If it was surrounded by ROR, the mitigation or the need for mitigation wouldn't be as critical, I think, as maybe this location here where you're talking about a small site with a lot of entitlements. And I believe that the ROR blended in the office and the residential portion of the ROR, because if you go back and look at where they put it, they know that they're going to have scenarios where the ROR will meet residential, even though it's urban residential densities. So that's the reason why the office and residential is in there. And then you look to the comp plan to figure out how to deal with a situation like this. And it talks about transitions, and it talks about how walking down the intensity and density of uses to make sure that you're not impacting neighbors. And one thing that a GDP will not do for you is be able to ascertain the degree of impacts. We don't know how to measure these impacts because the height diagram that we got from the applicant just basically is a graphic representation of what 401.5 already says you have to do. So we felt like a PSP, and I agree with the applicant, those concept plans look great, but they're not binding. And I know that we can attach exhibits to GDPs, but I couldn't, well, just staff and the applicant couldn't reach an agreement to commit to those concept plans. So if it were to get approved with the bubbled up GDP the way it is today, we might have something vastly different than what the board understood on the GDP when they last heard it. Ms. Schenk, do you have a question? Oh, I thought you were going to ask me a question. I'm sorry. So for those reasons, we felt, and we're probably able to meet with the applicant and work through a PSP, something that would satisfy the board's concerns. The FDOT facility there for the access is a concern. There's no way of knowing if they'll get that access approved. They did commit to the stipulation 8.3 in the staff report to pull the 68th off as going toward access requirements until such time that they can reach an agreement. And then we also would like to keep the stipulation in there and not delete any part of stipulation 8.1 that refers to the PSP and all of those requirements. I tried to keep it short. That's all I have, but I'll be happy to answer anybody's questions if you have any.
No, you got right down to business. I have two questions. One is well, I think they're both quick. 80 Slip Marina, they are approved for some commercial, a certain square footage of commercial. Is the marina public or private?
I heard the applicant mention for the first time that it would be private, but if you go back and look at the previous two meetings we've had, it was not committed to what kind of marina it would be.
No commitments.
No commitments.
That's how they operate over there. I'm teasing. Okay, so there's no commitment on public or private. I mean, I'd keep my options open. I don't knock them for that, but I need to know before I vote. And then, I've never asked this before. It might be a silly question, but if you don't ask, you don't know. Is there any possibility that we could, and it might be from Ms. Schenk, is it possible that we could pass an approval that's contingent upon them receiving their FDOT access with the median break?
Yeah, we already are. Stipulation A9 says all applicable state or federal permits shall be obtained before commencement of development. And that's
Okay.
the standard stip from the state.
And that
statute.
includes
Yes.
the median?
FDOT permit, correct.
Okay, that answers my question. That's all I have for you, sir. Commissioner Baugh, you're next on the board.
Yeah, just one question. Perhaps I think I already know the answer. Has there been any neighborhood meetings? Do you know, Marshall?
Yes, there has been some neighborhood meetings, and the notes, I think, were attached as part of the staff report, or the minutes, I think they were.
Here's my question. We're not getting really any answers to really what they're looking at doing. And I get the impression that that's pretty much been the par for the course. I mean, it went to Planning Commission back October 13th of 2022, then again February 2020, or before that, February of 2021. And it doesn't seem like we're getting really any information. So, I don't know how, that's why I ask about the neighborhood meetings. What could you tell them? I mean, you don't
Commissioner,
really know anything.
And I would like to let you know, too, that staff has been working on this submittal since 2018.
Since when?
2018.
2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can I just make a statement here, Marshall? Sure. You might want to tell the property owners to come up with a plan, get some answers,
Yes, ma'am.
bring it forward to the county so that we know exactly what they want to do and how. Because I think enough time and money, I'm sure it's cost a fortune with what's transpired just so far. And it's not going to fly this way. So, I mean, I wouldn't think, I can tell you I won't. But, you know, we need some answers. We need to know what's going on and what they really want to do. A conceptual plan, I thought it looked pretty good. But, you know, like you said, it's conceptual. It doesn't really mean anything, but it's a start. So, all right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There are no other commissioners on the board for questions for the applicant, unless any of you want to press your buttons at the last second. So then we're going to move on to public comment. Ms. Petroff, you're the only person who has signed up. Obviously, you're representing a large group of people, and you do have a document. I was going to give you the 10 minutes anyway, but okay. If you just hand that to the clerk. So you'll have 10 minutes to speak on this item. Please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and whether you've been sworn, and then you have 10 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Patricia Petroff. Lived in Manatee County for 43 years. I'm an attorney at law. I represent Raintree Inlets Association, and I have been sworn. This is the third public hearing I've been to on this project. 2 planning commission hearings a year apart, maybe 18 months apart, I don't remember, and now here, and this one was kicked to the curb, I think 3 times. My clients are respectfully requesting that you deny the request for lack of specificity. My clients are frightened, quite frankly, because we don't know what is going next to them. There is an easement for a 1.3 acre parcel of the 11 acres. There is an easement to 68th Street Court East. That is the only access that has a full median cut. Not to say that anybody can really use that full median cut because of the amount of traffic on US 301 at that location, but we are very concerned, even though it has allegedly been taken off the table with a stipulation. My clients can't afford to go to court with Mr. Vogler to argue about this, and it's an unfortunate situation. We're talking about a subdivision with 4.2 dwelling units per acre, more or less, next to a project with 22 units per acre and all of the other non-residential that they're requesting. If you approve this with the type of square footage and residential density today, you are handing them the golden ticket, the golden ticket. And that's not to say that my clients are opposed to development. They're not. As a land use attorney, this land screams for some way for it to be developed. It is underused waterfront property in Manatee County. Sadly, because of the difficult access to the property, no one has been able to make anything work. Mr. Vogler says, give us a chance. I would like you, if you give him a chance, please make it with a little more specificity, because I don't even think everything they want can fit on that project. I don't think all of it can fit. I don't know that because I'm not a land use planner, but it seems like a lot of intensity and density, and I don't understand how it's going to work. I don't want to have to go to court to cut that 1.3 acres and make a boundary so all the traffic from all of those units and all of those marina, if it turns out to be public, and all of those restaurants will gravitate to try to use our entrance. my clients deserve some quality of life and some peace and quiet where they live. You know, a restaurant with a rooftop bar on it, noise carries over water. Many of you who live on the water absolutely know that. As for all the special approvals, I don't know that they are appropriate. Why can't a developer, he has 11 acres, why can't he develop a property that conforms with your open space requirements? Maybe the tree, maybe the location of the trees is a problem, but you have no idea how many trees are going to be removed if you grant this. And especially if you don't bring it back as a PSP, that's even more frightening at the staff level, although I love and respect the staff. You know, I know how those negotiations work at the staff level. It is, as for the DOT pond, I have read the easement. They have the right to maintain that pond simply because as a property owner who lost some property, they want to they didn't want to leave it to DOT to maintain because sometimes DOT doesn't do the best of jobs for something adjacent to a development that you want to develop. It should not be factored into any kind of open space reduction requirement on the main piece of property. They got fair market value for that property, plus Mr. Vogler very aptly negotiated something so his client could keep it attractive for maybe an entranceway, maybe something, just an asset for their property, but it's a maintenance easement, that's it. The 80 Slip Marina, FDEP will handle that, but I will be the first to tell you that the water is so shallow there, I pole my boat in. If I want to get near the shoreline, I have to put the motor up and pole in at many tides, many different tides. It's very, very shallow at that location. Whether or not they can get that permit, I have no idea, but it is a matter for FDOT. It is a concern, however, to have that many boats in that area of the river. My clients have been basically doing a dance with this developer for at least 4 years, if not longer. We have asked questions. They have several of them, many of them. I did not go to the neighborhood meetings. They have asked questions. They went to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission asked for different reports and traffic studies, lots of things, and those were never provided. The applicant wants what he wants. He wants you to approve a project so that I really don't know his motivations, and I'm not going to guess. I have ideas about those, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to guess what his motivations are to get this through without giving you the information that you need to make a decision. You know, I respectfully request that you follow your Planning Commission recommendation of denial. You deny the project and ask the owners of the property to bring back an application with a planned development level for review. So you can approve the rezoning with a PDP site plan. And that way, everyone can have all of their questions answered with respect to how is this going to work? Because right now, my clients don't know how it's going to work, and this is not the way they wanted to spend their golden years with constantly having to look up what might be happening on the project next door. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but again, if you do, I agree. Something needs to happen on this property. I just don't know that this is the right something. I think it's too much on 11 acres. But should it be more than an A1 zoning on part of the property? Yes. Part of the property is zoned PDR. Should some of it be commercial? Yes. But I don't think you have enough information to provide adequate protection for your constituents. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? That's the only name I have written down. Yes, sir. So anyone else who would like to come forward, go ahead and come forward now. And sir, when you reach the podium, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence. Tell us whether you've been sworn, and you have 3 minutes.
Ed Trinsell, I'm a resident of Raintree and Inlet, and I have been sworn. And what I'd like to bring up is the physical constraint with respect to shoreline, which my home is bordering on the same shoreline that's being shared with PDMU. We're talking about less than a foot of water was at my shoreline this morning when I left to come here. Saying an 80-slip marina is going to require extensive dredging, not only in the area of the marina, but as well as channels to and from that marina. The impact that it's going to have on the fishery would be dramatic, not to mention the boating traffic for the surrounding homes. As far as the inlet, because it's not a canal, it's an inlet, it is at its widest point 40 feet, which separates PDMU from Raintree. It's accessible to this 80-slip marina, a less than 40-foot wide inlet, and 80 boats are going to be having free access to that. To me, is an accident looking for a place to happen. And add to it a public ramp, add that traffic. However, it is barely navigable due to its width and its irregular bottom and physical projections, such as docks associated with the homes along the inlet. Therein lies the problem of marine safety. We're going to have running aground, that's a guarantee. You're going to have collisions, that's another guarantee. Restricted use due to random traffic from the 80-slip marina and the public ramps. To me, it's an accident that has found a place to happen. And I would really like to consider that this project be not done in this manner. That's what I have to say, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sir, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to speak on this item? Sir, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence. Tell us if you've been sworn, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Greg Gregory. I live in Manatee County, and I have been sworn. So I'm actually representing the ownership of the property to the west of that, which is Rocky Bluff. That's our incorporated name. We call it Palm Grove, is the mobile home park. So we are opposite of we actually would be in favor of approval of this. I don't know about all of the the site plan stuff and the looking at things. I'm talking about as an overall. We like the idea of what they're able to do there. We have no intention of selling our mobile home park, but we do know that as generations move along and as time marches forward, the probability of a mobile home park being able to sustain itself in those areas is becoming less and less. This is probably a decision that would be made by my kids or their kids or whatever. So we're not looking at anything like that. And the reason that I'm saying that is because within our mobile home park and within other communities, it's been said that we have a deal with them and they're going to buy us or we're going to do all, and we don't have anything like that. We have no agreement with them. We have no agreement with anybody. We've turned down more than I can even count people who want to do anything like that. We're very happy with what we have. We're happy with what we're doing. But I also have to look to the future with what will be the best use of that property as time goes on, and that would be, I would feel like a different generation is going to have to be looking at something like that. So we're in favor of it. We like the ROR. I don't know which one of those comes first, whether it's residential or retail or office or whatever, but we like the idea of that because that seems to match what it looks like is happening in the area there, especially with the road 301 that's going to be coming across the across the river there, and then I think the diamond that they're putting in there, and then that's going to be heading traffic towards the north. So the overall, the ROR that's been put in place by the county here, and that's in your development plan, we think that's a very good use of the property as time goes on. So we're in favor of it, but again, I'm also wanting to state for the people who live in our property, we are not doing anything right now. We do like what they're doing. We like the idea of what that brings to our area. Since I've lived here my whole life, it's kind of neat to see things as they grow and develop and change, and we still have the green area, and my time is up. Thank you.
Well done, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward at this time from the public to speak on this item? Okay, not seeing anyone. We're going to close public comment, and we're going to go to discussion and deliberation of this board. Right now, I'm sorry.
We have to have rebuttal, we have to
Oh,
have.
okay, we'll have rebuttal
And
first.
staff-
Excuse me, I was going off of memory, ma'am.
And also, staff gives a summary, I think we need to hear from the transportation staff on the issue of the median cuts before we get into rebuttal. I'd like to
Okay.
have that on the record.
So
because
if
we're discussing transportation.
Yeah, if Clark is back there, if he could come out for staff rebuttal. Oh, I'm sorry. He works too. I'm a creature of habit. All right.
Yeah.
Rebuttal from the applicant.
Yes, Ed Vogler, thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
All right, the applicant goes last to rebuttal. I just want to make sure we get the staff in first.
You did say it first, but you're right, they do go last.
I'll take their time, it'll be fine.
No, we'd like to give you the first word and the last word. So, Marshall or Transportation. Meredith, you want to go first? Introduce yourself, don't forget.
Good morning, Mary Wahid, Transportation Planning, and have been sworn. So regarding the question about the access to the project, I think that's the key question to make this project viable to meet all the requirements for the LDC. And I think some of the salient points have been touched upon, but having a medium break that can work for this project, although it's FDOT's decision, there are some constraints because depending on the class of the facility, you need to meet a certain distance from existing medium break to have one access that's viable for this project. And at this stage, from this traffic study or any analysis that we got, it's very preliminary, very general level to support the GDP. There was no operational analysis, and it's not required for a GDP, but we don't have the parameters to kind of determine whether operationally this access configuration will work or not. Does that answer some of your questions?
It does mine.
Yes.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Marshall, did you want to make any final statements? Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to make a closing statement?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ed Vogler, I have been sworn. The request that I heard from Ms. Petriff was to approve the rezone with a PDP, and I submit that that's what you're doing. If you approve this with a stipulation that requires us to come back for a PSP or PDP plan in front of this board and obtain a majority approval, that's what you're approving today. What you're doing for us today is to set the uses, the types of uses that are allowed, and the limitations on density and intensity. That's what you're doing for us today. And so, Commissioner Baugh, if I could address you directly, if this is going to be the condition, A1, which is to require a preliminary plan to come back for board approval, then the special exceptions today are not necessary. We can withdraw those because we'll have all of that data, the tree survey, the study, and where all that is located on a PSP. And so I think, hoping that gives you a little bit better feel about that. And let me say this, I'm going to respond to a couple other points, but let me say this, the GDP process in part, is helpful to the little guy. Okay, sometimes we stand up here and we represent the big guy, and we're proud to do that. Sometimes there's little guys. And Commissioner Satcher, I remember when we talked about the coastal provisions, and there's people that they're not engaged in this. They just own a piece of land and they've owned it. Sometimes there's little guys, and they need to get their plan approved so that they can go to the market, so they can reach out to people that want to be here, that want to design something special for the county. But if you got no approval, you got bumpkins to talk about. You got nothing to talk to DOT about. You got nothing to talk to county planning about. You don't know how many square feet you got to plan for, traffic generation. You know nothing. And so if you approve a GDP with significant guardrails and make us come back, then at least we get part of the bundle of rights that we can confidently go forward. And let me just say, these people that I've worked with since 2018 are responsive and responsible, and they'd like to get this approval, and of course we're asking for it. But I think the characterization of 2018 is unfair, and I want to explain. You'll all remember that this site was the canary that came forward and had to challenge the coastal evacuation area limitations that were being applied wrongly in an ROR. We appealed that to the board. Took an incredible period of time. First time of consideration. We then had another appeal over at 69th and US 41, same issue. Prevailed again with the board because it was right. And then the board said, no, you know what? We're going to look at our coastal policies in the comp plan, and we're going to eliminate some of the baggage that we don't need. And that happened. And we were the progenitors of that, and that's what took a lot of the time. Not to mention COVID and et cetera. But nevertheless, it shouldn't be unfairly characterized that way, and that's true. The ferry is, of course, something we can accommodate if it's proximate. And so that's something to know. With respect to a marina, you don't just wake up one day and say, hey, let's have a marina. We've done a bathymetric survey. We've done a grass survey. And you need to know all the criteria that is employed by the state of Florida to even conceive a marina. And so, yes, you're not permitting all of that. That's done by other agencies. But it's like, not a fair characterization that this is just a finger in the wind saying, hey, that would be a good idea. It's an integrated plan for various uses in this area of the county that take advantage of the Manatee River. As it relates to the open space, so we're asking, this is really, I'm not going over the history again of the pond and all that other stuff, but really what's happening here is there's an overlay of extra open space because of entranceway criteria. We're on the very edge of the entranceway, that is true, and overlay of open space criteria because of coastal. And so, it's not that we're not meeting the normal and customary open space criteria that would exist in any other place outside the entranceway and the coastal area. And so I don't think it's that big of an ask, and you'll make that decision, of course. And frankly, if we kick it to a PSP, we can show it all to you. We can show you where the open space is and so forth. So in fairness, we think we presented a good plan. We'd like the approval to go forward. There's lots of limitations. I call them guardrails. They're hard limitations. We proposed the stipulation about the step back. You know why? Yes, it's in the code. But we proposed it so that we can emphasize it. And we can say, like my contracts professor used to say, comma, and we really mean it, right? So these are things that we're committed to. We'd like to get the GDP approved. And I thank you for your kind attention. And it always seems that we have these philosophical points. And I don't think that we're going to win this one on the PSP. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The order of the board for speaking is Satcher, Cruz, Van Osten Bridge. Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think that as often happens up here, we've got competing interests and competing rights. And, you know, Ms. Petroff mentioned some of the questions about open space and trees. And then, of course, we've already mentioned, you know, my main concern, which is the residents to the east. And I honestly don't, I mean, something's got to give, it seems like there. And I do know that we have a great tree fund that plants thousands and thousands of trees and those types of things. So those aren't my number one concerns. I did have a question for our attorney. Am I to understand correctly that if this were to get approved today without the and with a required PSP to come before us later, is that the functional equivalent to a PDP? I mean, would they be required to do each of the things that come before us later if that's what we approve?
You're asking if we approve it requiring the PSP to come back later?
Right, because, I mean, they had that as a stipulation, but I think it's pretty clear that's not going to fly. I think their best, you know, hope, and, you know, if it were to go through, I don't know where everybody's vote is, but the only way I could see it going through today would be if they also, and they mentioned it multiple times, bring us a PSP later that comes before us for a final vote.
The applicants heard all your testimony. The board has discretion to continue this, and ask for more information and see what they come back with.
Sarah, is it true that if the board approves the GDP, though, that would take the place of the PSP and then the FSP would be approved administratively by staff? No.
It depends whether that stipulation's in there or not.
Okay, so the stipulation would then override that's, I think, what maybe Commissioner Satcher's asking.
Yeah, we've approved zoning ordinances to have a stipulation. The site plan comes back later. But, you know, as Ms. Vogel pointed out, you are awarding entitlements with this vote. It gives the board sort of a false sense of security by saying, we'll approve this now and have a public hearing later on preliminary site plan, because your scope of review later is more narrow. Now you have all your comp plan, all your compatibility issues, and so forth. You can nitpick or go into design details when we have your PSP hearing, but you can't say, oh, this use isn't compatible. We made a mistake before. Sorry, we're denying your preliminary site plan. We can't do that because you're determining compatibility really now at the GDP level. So it's sort of a catch-22 for the board. Yes, you get maybe a little more sense of security or reassurance that later on you'll see more details, but it can come back to bite you in litigation if you deny the preliminary site plan later. Because it's implicit now you're finding compatibility with the comp plan for all of these uses, and there's a whole long list of uses here.
But it seems like people's concerns are the property to the east and the access to the road to the east. So I would assume a PSP would address those two things. If those were, am I wrongly assuming, could they bring us something that doesn't address those two things and then sue us for not voting for it, even though we've been pretty clear those are our two concerns?
Well, I've seen preliminary site plans conditioned upon getting FDOT permits later. They probably may not have an FDOT permit when they come back with a PSP. I don't know.
Commissioner Satcher, would you like to dialogue with Commissioner Baugh, because she's kicking me under the table that she'd like to speak?
Sure, that'd be
Not
great.
on, but she's not on the board.
Mr. Baugh, give us a good idea here. I would appreciate it. Go ahead. What's your solution?
Commissioner Satcher, I hear what you're saying, and I know that we have right now Commissioner Cruz and Commissioner Van Ostenbridge ahead of me to speak. So I will only say that perhaps in your dialogue with the county attorney, perhaps you should look into the possibility of only doing today a continuance to get more information from the applicant. Have them come back and bring us more information that we can look at to make a decision. Because I think if I understood Sarah, if we vote today and approve this, then we're giving them this without any more information. It's a done deal per se. So I think from what I'm hearing from you and from others, we need more information, which is going to require a continuance. Am I right, Ms. Shank, on that?
That's one option for the board, yes.
Okay. I mean, but we don't have to, they already have given up on not bringing a preliminary site plan in the future. So, I mean, we could take that stipulation out in our motion.
We could, however, there are other commissioners on the board to speak, but I mean, I can tell you that I have several other concerns that I don't have enough information on either.
Exactly.
That those entitlements would be granted with a vote today, even if we took stipulation A1 out.
Understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Cruz?
Yeah, that was kind of one of my first questions. I mean, here's the thing with this. As it's laid out, as the conceptual plan was done, I absolutely no problem with this. I think this is a great use for this land, as long as it's done in a way that makes sense. So we just don't have that. And here's the thing, and I'm not saying you're doing it by any stretch, don't take this like this, but this has been going on for 5 years, and it's been in front of the planning commission twice, now in front of us. The planning commission wasn't a big fan, staff wasn't a big fan. I don't think you have the opposition on this board that you may have had in some other aspects of this government. I don't have a problem with this in the way it's laid out. But if we're just giving entitlements and so forth, then there's nothing to say even this owner is going to be the developer of it, because they're not committing to a site plan. They're just committing to X amount of residents, X amount of whatever, and then you can do with this property what you will, and then we're at the mercy of another person down the road who maybe have different views of it. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the lack of open space for waterfront. I don't want to pave over our entire waterfront. I would have honestly preferred adding a story or two. You had 9 stories originally on that one building. I would have rather you put 1 to 2 stories below it as parking, and then you would have had an extra, whatever it was, 20 feet per story setback to give more setback to the east and make it a little bit taller, put the parking there, less ground parking, and there's your open space, and now you don't even have to stipulate to that. The marina is not a problem because we don't dictate whether or not you can put a marina on there. If you can't get those approvals, then that's on you, not on us. I'm not going to opine on that. I mean, I know you've been dealing with this for a long time. I hate to say let's just throw a continuance, but I do think this is too important of a piece of property. It'll dictate the surrounding area. It'll dictate the property to the west, whether you intend to sell or not. It dictates the livelihood of the people to the east. It's going to affect the Holiday Inn Express and the Spring Hill Suites. If you came to us with a formal site plan for approval based conceptually close to what you presented, I would have no problem. I would approve this. I don't have a problem with your stipulations. I don't have a problem with your plan. I don't have a problem with your uses, as long as I know I'm approving something specific. I just don't feel like we are, and I almost feel like it's kind of intentional that we're not, because it's still conceptual. And this isn't, you bought it last week. You've been doing this for 5 years. I get what you're saying. I don't disagree that it makes it easier to go find a flag for a hotel, and a flag for a hotel is going to have some requirements of what they want to do with it. And until you're comfortable you can have a hotel, it's hard to go talk to the franchisees. I understand there's separate multifamily developers. They may have their own. I get that having this comfort, but I think maybe what you can look at is, I think you do have the comfort from this board. No one on this board is flat out saying that the overall density intensity is too much here, or the concept of what you're proposing, or even the total numbers of what you're proposing, at least in my mind. I can't speak for everyone. I don't think you're, I'm just saying nobody said that. Nobody up here has flat out said 250 units is too much, or 6 stories is too high, or 80 marina slips is too many. Nobody said that up here yet. So I think you have the general consensus, based on my reflection of comments, that your concept isn't bad. I just think everybody would be more comfortable talking to the people to the east and the west and Ellenton as a whole, that we have a better, clear definition of what's going on with this waterfront. So if people want to continue it, then I'm fully on board with doing so. This is kind of a torn one. I'm fine in theory approving this and trusting that people are going to do the right thing with it, but if people want to continue it, I'm not going to fight back on that.
Thank you, sir. I'm next on the board. Although Commissioner Cruz really articulated essentially everything that I wanted to convey to the applicant very well. Commissioner Baugh is still on the board, but Mr. Gause, Mr. Vogler, I'm going to recommend that you request a continuance. Commissioner Baugh.
Actually, no need. It's all been said.
Okay. Mr. Vogler?
Well, you sometimes can read the tea leaves, writing on the wall, whatever phraseology you want to do. And look, we'd rather have a continuance than a denial.
Sure.
And so that's just fact. However, when we come back, you can't say, oh, it's been since 2018 and then they're still here.
I think ultimately the board wants to be a yes, we just help us get there. Commissioner Cruz, you're back on the board, sir.
I was going to say almost the same thing. I also want you to take continuance instead of a denial, because I do in fact like this project. I like every part of what you're intending to put on this. I just think for the sake of our constituents and to make sure we're looking at this clearly, that you come back with something a little more specific. So we'd rather you continue it because we do want this approved in a form that makes sense for Manatee County. So I hope you come back with something great, and I don't think any of us will have a problem approving it when you do.
David, thank you, sir. David, will you pull a motion for a continuance up on our screens, please?
Good job, George.
And Mr. Chair, your next meeting is March 23rd, and I suspect the agenda's full for that. And well, there's April 20th. And if they're going to redo the site plan, go through DRC, I think staff would need at least a month to look at it.
Mr. Gauss?
Mr. Chairman, we would recommend that you table it until we can bring back a PSP, which is date.
So you don't-
We're asking for no date certain to
No
re-advertise?
date certain, because
Okay.
we have to go, staff's going to want to look at any PSP we submit, so it's not coming back in 2
Yeah, I
months. It'll be
understand.
months.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, so to clarify, Commissioner Baugh, is your motion to continue this to no date certain?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Baugh to continue this item to no date certain. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bearden.
And can I just clarify that and to re-advertise at the subsequent hearing?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, do you have that? That's agreed upon by Commissioner Baugh. Commissioner Bearden, you agree to that as a seconder? And he agrees as well. There are two commissioners on the board at this time. So before we hold the vote, we'll call Commissioner Baugh and then Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the applicant understanding where we're coming from here. It's not that we don't want to move forward with it necessarily, but it's just not enough information here for us to do so today. So when you come back, please remember that and give us some serious, solid information that we can use. Because if not, we're still going to be where we are today. So I just thank you for your patience and look forward to when you return. Thank you.
Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to, I think, I can't speak for everyone, but as staff is looking and going back and forth, it seems to me on this project, there's going to be a balancing, that has to take place. And I want to be sure that we're fixing the things that, the commission is most concerned about, which I think is they want to see what's actually going to happen. I don't see how they can get anywhere close to what they're proposing, which everyone is saying they like the general idea of, if we don't make some considerations on some of the things that they have talked about. Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. So we have a motion to continue by Commissioner Baugh. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bearden. We've held public comment. There are no other commissioners on the board at this time. Let's cast our votes. And Madam Clerk, the motion to continue passes unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, commissioners, that is our last item today. Are there any commissioners who would like to make commissioner comments before we close out?
I do.
Commissioner Baugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, there was a lot of speculation as to why I was not in the commission meeting on Tuesday. And it's because I was in Orlando at another meeting for the...
Hold on a second. The meeting is still going on, folks. Please exit in an orderly fashion. Go ahead now.
I forgot what I was saying. I was in Orlando at a Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council meeting, and this is a state organization that has 27 different MPOs, et cetera, on it. I was very honored that the members voted for me to take over as chair in our next meeting, so I just wanted to give a big shout out to our past chair, he's Commissioner Nick Maddox from Tallahassee. He's done a great job the last couple of years. So I look forward to moving forward. But I also, the main reason I wanted to mention that was because we all know about the governor with his $7 billion infrastructure bill that he had a press conference on the other day. And I think I'd ask Dana, I think she sent all of you an email, but just so everyone is aware, Manatee County did have a transportation project on that list, and that was on State Road 70 from Bourneside down to 675. For the new commissioners that aren't aware, this was something that I had worked on, well, for the last probably 4 or 5 years, trying to get State Road 70 4-laned all the way across the state, because it would help with evacuation if need be, in case of a disaster. We've seen many times how we do have a problem with evacuation, not to mention State Road 70 has been a serious problem for accidents, fatalities, et cetera, over the years. So this will be like the first phase of this. And it's a great move forward. I just want to thank Governor DeSantis for coming up with that. And I did do a quote yesterday for a newspaper outlet that is carrying the story about Governor DeSantis and his infrastructure bill. So look forward to that moving forward. I just want to make sure that all commissioners were aware. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing there. You don't get any extra pay for that, I don't believe, right? Yeah.
That's okay.
But we, no overtime around here, yeah. Commissioners, anyone else like to make a comment before we close out? All right, good meeting today. We're adjourned.